In Utah's high desert, where federal boundaries hide underground secrets, one surveyor's midnight work revealed more than coordinates. On the night of September 15, 2019, Marcus Chen adjusted his GPS unit for the third time in an hour. The 34-year-old Bureau of Land Management surveyor stood alone in Utah's high desert basin country, 47 miles southwest of Delta, where the nearest streetlight might as well have been on another planet. The landscape around Fish Springs National Wildlife Refuge stretched endlessly in every direction, a moonlit expanse of alkali flats and sagebrush broken only by distant mountain silhouettes. Chen had chosen this particular night for Section Line 47 because the weather forecast promised clear skies and minimal wind. Perfect conditions for precision GPS mapping along one of the most disputed federal boundary lines in Millard County. Chen's white government pickup truck idled quietly on a gravel access road, its headlights cutting through the desert darkness. He had been working these remote boundaries for 6 months, part of a broader federal initiative to resolve decades-old survey discrepancies using modern GPS technology. The work required patience, attention to detail, and a tolerance for solitude that few possessed. At 11:47 p.m., Chen keyed his radio for his scheduled check-in with the BLM dispatch office in Salt Lake City. His voice carried clearly across the static. "Base, this is Survey Unit 7. Current position 39.8547 north, 113.4021 west. Section Line 47 proceeding on schedule. Weather clear, visibility unlimited. Next check at 01:15 hours." The response crackled back. "Copy. Survey 7. Acknowledged at 23:47. Stay safe out there." Chen clipped the radio back to his belt and returned to his equipment. The GPS unit displayed coordinates with sub-meter accuracy, each reading carefully logged in his field notebook alongside compass bearings and elevation readings. This was methodical, solitary work, the kind that required absolute precision and left no room for error. The September night air carried the sharp scent of sagebrush and alkali dust. Temperatures had dropped from the day's scorching heat to a comfortable 68 degrees, and Chen worked efficiently in the coolness, moving from point to point along the disputed boundary line. His headlamp beams swept across survey markers placed decades earlier, many now weathered and difficult to read. This particular section line had generated more controversy than most. Local ranchers claimed federal boundaries had crept steadily eastward over the years, consuming traditional grazing lands through bureaucratic expansion. Chen's job was to determine the truth through precise GPS coordinates that could be verified and defended in court if necessary. By 12:52 a.m., his GPS unit had recorded precise coordinate readings along the boundary line. Each measurement was automatically logged with a timestamp, creating an electronic trail of his progress. The data would later be processed and cross-referenced with historical surveys dating back to 1943. Chen never made his scheduled 1:15 a.m. radio check. When BLM dispatch attempted to raise him at 1:20 a.m., they received only static. A second attempt 5 minutes later yielded the same result. By 1:30 a.m., protocol dictated that a welfare check be initiated. Millard County Sheriff's Deputy Roy Hutchins found Chen's pickup truck at 3:47 a.m., exactly where the GPS coordinates indicated it should be. The engine was still running, headlights still blazing across the empty desert. Chen's thermos sat open on the tailgate, still warm to the touch. His survey equipment lay scattered around the vehicle. GPS unit, measuring tape, field notebook, radio, all within a precise 50-foot radius. But Marcus Chen was nowhere to be found. Deputy Hutchins walked the perimeter around the truck 3 times, his flashlight beam searching for any sign of where Chen might have gone. The ground was hard-packed alkali and gravel, poor for holding footprints under the best circumstances. But even accounting for the difficult surface conditions, the complete absence of any tracks beyond the immediate area around the truck struck Hutchins as deeply unusual. It was as if Chen had simply vanished from a spot in the middle of nowhere, leaving behind a running truck and carefully arranged equipment, but no trace of where he had gone or why. Dawn broke over the Fish Springs Basin at 6:23 a.m. on September 16th, revealing a landscape that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. Sheriff Roy Morrison arrived on scene to find Deputy Hutchins guarding Chen's abandoned vehicle, now silent after running out of gas sometime during the night. Morrison, a 26-year veteran of Millard County law enforcement, had overseen missing person cases before, but none quite like this. The sheer openness of the terrain made it almost impossible to imagine how someone could vanish without a trace. "You can see for miles in every direction," Morrison later told investigators. "There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to go that you wouldn't be visible." By 8:00 a.m., Morrison had contacted the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Utah's Department of Public Safety. The jurisdictional complexity was immediate. Chen had disappeared on federal land, but local sheriff's deputies had found the scene. Each agency claimed some degree of responsibility, and coordination proved challenging from the start. The Utah Department of Public Safety provided helicopter support, with an aerial crew scanning the surrounding terrain and expanding grid patterns. From 500 feet, the landscape revealed its geological history: ancient Lake Bonneville terraces, limestone outcroppings, and scattered playas where seasonal water collected. But no sign of Marcus Chen. Meanwhile, BLM investigators retrieved Chen's GPS unit and downloaded its data logs. What they discovered raised more questions than answers. The unit had recorded coordinates every 30 seconds throughout Chen's survey work, creating a precise electronic trail of his movements. The final entry was logged at 12:52:17, coordinates 39.8547 degree N, 113.402, 1 degree WA. After that timestamp, nothing. No distress signal, no continued logging, no indication of equipment malfunction. The GPS unit had simply stopped recording data at that exact moment and location. "It's like someone threw a switch," explained BLM electronics specialist Janet Rodriguez. "GPS units don't just stop working. Even if the battery dies or the unit is damaged, you typically see degraded signals or error messages. This was a clean cutoff. No technical explanation for it." Ground search teams arrived from across central Utah, including volunteers from the Millard County Search and Rescue Unit and experienced trackers from the Mormon Pioneer National Heritage Area. The teams spread out in a standard grid pattern, focusing initially on a 3-mile radius from Chen's vehicle. The search revealed something unexpected about the equipment scattered around Chen's truck. Rather than being dropped randomly or blown by wind, the items were arranged in an almost perfect circle. Chen's measuring tape lay exactly 47 feet northeast of the truck. His field notebook was 49 feet to the southeast. The radio was 51 feet to the southwest. Each item was positioned at nearly the same distance from the vehicle's center point. "That's not how things fall when someone drops them," observed search coordinator Tom Bradley. "That's not how wind scatters equipment. That's deliberate placement, but placed by whom and why?" Dr. Sarah Winters, a wildlife biologist from the Fish Springs Refuge, joined the search effort on the second day. Her knowledge of local wildlife patterns and behavior had proven valuable in previous missing person cases. But what she observed troubled her deeply. The complete absence of animal activity in that area was unusual, Dr. Winters later reported. "This is prime habitat for kit foxes, kangaroo rats, jackrabbits, nocturnal species that should have been active when Chen was working. But there were no tracks, no scat, no signs of recent animal presence within a quarter-mile radius of his disappearance point." Night vision cameras positioned throughout the refuge regularly documented wildlife movement patterns. Dr. Winters reviewed footage from the evening of September 15th and found something striking. Animals that routinely used trails within half a mile of Chen's location had avoided the area entirely that night. Mule deer that had used the same water sources for months took detours of several miles, rather than approach the vicinity where Chen disappeared. "Animals have senses we don't," Dr. Winters explained. "They detect things, sounds, scents, electromagnetic fields that humans miss. When wildlife universally avoids an area, there's usually a reason. By the end of the second day, search teams had covered nearly 40 square miles without finding any trace of Chen. No footprints, no clothing fragments, no personal items beyond those found in the precise circle around his truck. The helicopter crews had photographed every significant rock formation, wash, and depression within a 10-mile radius. Sheriff Morrison expanded the search parameters, bringing in cadaver dogs from Salt Lake City and ground-penetrating radar equipment from the Utah Geological Survey. The dogs showed no interest in the immediate area around Chen's vehicle, but became agitated when working the perimeter of the site. They would approach to within approximately 50 feet of the truck's location, then refuse to go closer. "I've worked with these dogs for 8 years," said handler Michelle Carson. "They're trained to search methodically and thoroughly. I've never seen them refuse to work an area like this. Something was keeping them back, something they could sense but we couldn't." As the search entered its third day, the mystery of Marcus Chen's disappearance had only deepened. Every piece of evidence seemed to raise new questions, rather than provide answers. The precise arrangement of his equipment, the complete absence of tracks, the strange behavior of both wildlife and search dogs, all pointed to circumstances far beyond a simple missing person case. Something had happened at coordinates 39.8547 degree N, 113.4. 1 degree W that defied easy explanation. Tom Hadley's weathered hands traced the fence line that separated his family's grazing land from the Fish Springs National Wildlife Refuge. The 67-year-old rancher had been fighting boundary disputes with federal agencies for over 4 decades, inheriting both the land and the legal battles from his father. "They move the line a little bit each year," Hadley explained to investigators on September 18th, 3 days after Chen's disappearance. "First it was just a few feet here and there, then it became acres. Now they're talking about hundreds of acres that my family has grazed for 3 generations." The Hadley Ranch encompassed 12,000 acres of deeded land and grazing rights, making it one of the larger operations in Millard County. Tom's grandfather had purchased the original homestead in 1923, when the federal government encouraged settlement of the high desert regions. But federal land policies had shifted dramatically over the decades, and what once seemed like permanent arrangements had become increasingly contested. Marcus Chen's survey work was part of a broader Bureau of Land Management initiative to resolve these boundary discrepancies using modern GPS technology. The project aimed to create definitive digital boundaries that would replace aging survey markers and hand-drawn maps that dated back to the 1940s. For ranchers like Hadley, the stakes couldn't be higher. Chen came by the ranch 3 days before he disappeared, Hadley recalled. September 12th, late in the afternoon. He was polite enough, asked permission to cross our land to access some of the boundary markers, but he was asking strange questions. According to Hadley, Chen had inquired about ground disturbances along the disputed boundary line. Had Hadley noticed any unusual changes to the landscape? Any new depressions or elevated areas? Any signs of recent excavation or construction activity? I told him the only disturbances were the ones caused by federal agencies constantly surveying and resurveying the same areas, Hadley said. But he seemed convinced there was something else, something he'd seen in his preliminary surveys that didn't match the historical records. Chen's field notes, recovered from his motel room in Delta, revealed the extent of his concerns. In careful handwriting, he had documented GPS coordinates that didn't align with federal boundary markers placed in 1943. The discrepancies were significant. In some areas, the GPS readings suggested federal land boundaries were incorrect by as much as 200 acres. For the Hadley family and other local ranchers, these discrepancies represented potential vindication of decades-old claims. If Chen's GPS data proved accurate, it could mean that federal agencies had been enforcing boundaries that were legally invalid, effectively claiming privately owned grazing land through bureaucratic error. But the implications extended beyond simple property disputes. Federal grazing rights generated substantial lease revenues for the Bureau of Land Management, and any significant boundary corrections could impact millions of dollars in annual fees. Water rights, mineral extraction claims, and conservation easements all depended on precisely defined property boundaries. Marcus was meticulous, explained his supervisor, BLM District Surveyor Janet Phillips. He double-checked everything, cross-referenced historical documents, consulted with county records offices. When he reported discrepancies, you could take them to court with confidence. Phillips revealed that Chen had requested additional time and resources to complete his survey of the Fish Springs boundary. His initial findings had identified what he termed priority investigation sites, locations where GPS coordinates differed significantly from established markers. Site A, where Chen eventually disappeared, was at the top of his list. He wanted ground-penetrating radar for that location, Phillips said. Marcus suspected the original 1943 survey markers had been deliberately moved or replaced. He thought someone had been manipulating the boundary line over the years, but he needed more sophisticated equipment to prove it. Local ranchers had long suspected federal agencies of gradually expanding their territorial claims through administrative sleight of hand. Stories circulated of survey markers being moved during routine maintenance, of boundary descriptions being subtly altered in updated documents, of grazing permits being denied in areas that had been privately used for generations. Hadley pulled out a manila folder thick with documents dating back to the 1920s, original homestead papers, grazing lease agreements, water rights certificates, and decades of correspondence with federal agencies. The paper trail revealed a pattern of incremental federal expansion that had gradually reduced private land holdings throughout the region. My grandfather's original survey showed our eastern boundary extending to what's now the heart of the wildlife refuge, Hadley said. Each generation has fought to hold on to what's rightfully ours, but the government has more lawyers than we have cattle. The timing of Chen's disappearance troubled local ranchers. His survey work was scheduled to conclude within 2 weeks, and preliminary findings suggested federal agencies might be forced to return significant acreage to private ownership. For families like the Hadleys, Chen's data represented the best chance in decades to reclaim ancestral lands. Makes you wonder if someone didn't want Marcus to finish his work, observed neighboring rancher Dale Peterson. There's a lot of money at stake, a lot of federal jobs that depend on managing all that land. Maybe someone decided the risk was too great. Federal officials disputed any suggestion that Chen's survey findings posed a threat to established boundaries. We welcome accurate surveys, stated BLM Regional Director Carl Morrison. Our goal is to establish definitive boundaries that serve everyone's interests. If historical markers were inaccurate, we want to know about it. As investigators delved deeper into the boundary disputes, they discovered a complex web of competing interests, conflicting documentation, and decades of unresolved legal questions. Chen's disappearance had occurred at the center of it all, at coordinates that he had specifically identified as requiring priority investigation. But whether the boundary war provided a motive for Chen's disappearance remained an open question, one that would only become more complex as the true scope of his discoveries came to light. Marcus Chen preferred the night shift for reasons that went beyond simple comfort. The extreme diurnal temperature swings of Utah's high desert made daytime surveying brutal. Temperatures routinely exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit during September afternoons, while nights cooled to the mid-60s. But temperature was only part of the equation. GPS accuracy improved significantly after sunset, explained Dr. Sarah Winters, who had worked extensively with Chen on environmental impact assessments. Atmospheric interference diminishes, satellite signals become more stable, and you can achieve sub-meter precision that's impossible during peak daylight hours. Chen's night surveying also avoided air traffic complications. The Fish Springs area lay beneath approach corridors for both civilian and military aircraft, with Hill Air Force Base conducting regular training flights over the region. Radio frequency interference from aircraft communications could disrupt GPS signals, creating measurement errors that Chen's meticulous nature couldn't tolerate. But Dr. Winters revealed another factor that had increasingly influenced Chen's work schedule: electromagnetic anomalies that seemed to intensify during daylight hours. Beginning in early August, Chen had reported strange fluctuations in his GPS readings that occurred only in specific locations along the disputed boundary. Marcus documented these anomalies carefully, Dr. Winters said. His equipment would show normal readings for miles, then suddenly register coordinate drift or signal interference when he reached certain waypoints. The problems were consistent. Always the same locations, always during the same time periods. Chen's field supervisor, Janet Phillips, confirmed that he had filed formal reports about the electromagnetic interference. He was convinced something underground was affecting his equipment. Not equipment malfunction, external interference from an unknown source. Marcus requested ground-penetrating radar and magnetometer surveys for the affected areas. Review of Chen's detailed field notes revealed his growing concern about these subsurface irregularities. His handwriting, normally precise and technical, became increasingly urgent as he documented GPS anomalies at 17 different coordinate points along the boundary line. Each location was marked with the notation priority investigation required. The site where Chen disappeared, coordinates 39.8547 degree N, 113.4021 degree Wa, was labeled as Priority Investigation Site A in his notes. Chen had identified this location as the most significant source of electromagnetic interference, with GPS readings that varied by as much as 15 meters from day to day. That level of coordinate drift is unheard of, explained BLM electronics specialist Janet Rodriguez. GPS satellites maintain consistent orbital patterns. Ground-based reference points don't move. When you get that kind of variation, something is actively interfering with the signal. Chen had theorized that metallic objects or structures underground might be creating electromagnetic fields that disrupted GPS accuracy. His notes referenced historical mining claims in the area, abandoned equipment that might still be affecting modern electronics, and the possibility of undocumented subsurface installations. Dr. Winters recalled Chen's growing fascination with the geological complexity of the Fish Springs region. He'd started requesting reports from the Utah Geological Survey, researching underground water systems, studying historical mining records. Marcus was convinced the boundary disputes were connected to something beneath the surface. The limestone geology of the area made subsurface anomalies plausible. Fish Springs sat atop ancient cave systems carved by underground water flow over millions of years. Many of these caverns remained unmapped, and some were large enough to contain substantial metallic deposits or human-made structures. Chen's motel room in Delta yielded additional evidence of his underground theories. Investigators found geological survey maps covered with handwritten notes, photocopied mining claim documents dating back to the 1920s, and correspondence with the Utah Division of Water Rights about underground aquifer systems. Of particular interest was a hand-drawn map that Chen had created, showing the correlation between his GPS, anomaly sites, and historical mining claims. The pattern was striking. 13 of his 17 problem locations coincided exactly with abandoned mine shafts or mineral extraction sites from the early 20th century. Marcus believed someone had been using these old mining sites for purposes that weren't documented in public records, Dr. Winters explained. He thought the electromagnetic interference might be coming from equipment or materials stored underground, possibly in violation of federal land use regulations. Chen's supervisor revealed that he had requested permission to conduct nighttime surveys with additional specialized equipment, magnetometers to detect metallic anomalies, ground-penetrating radar to map subsurface structures, and seismic sensors to identify underground voids. The requests were pending approval when he disappeared. Marcus was methodical, but he wasn't paranoid, Phillips emphasized. If he reported electromagnetic anomalies, they existed. If he suspected underground interference, there was evidence to support it. His disappearance occurred at the exact location he'd identified as the most significant anomaly site. The timing of Chen's final survey session had been carefully planned. September 15th offered ideal atmospheric conditions, clear skies, minimal wind, and a new moon that reduced light pollution interference with his equipment. Chen had specifically requested that evening for his investigation of Priority Site, AA. Dr. Winters noted that Chen's GPS readings from previous visits to the site showed increasing electromagnetic interference over time. It was as if something underground was becoming more active, generating stronger fields that disrupted his equipment more severely with each visit. Chen's final radio transmission at 11:47 p.m. had reported normal GPS function in clear weather conditions. But his equipment logs showed that electromagnetic interference began affecting his readings just 43 minutes later. The final GPS coordinate entry at 12:52 a.m. occurred at the precise moment when interference would have been at its peak. Whatever Chen had discovered at Priority Investigation Site A, it had been significant enough to disrupt sophisticated government surveying equipment and, ultimately, to make Marcus Chen himself disappear without a trace. 3 weeks into the investigation, Dr. Winters made a discovery that would reshape the entire search for Marcus Chen. While reviewing geological surveys of the Fish Springs area, she found something that Chen's supervisor had overlooked. The region sat directly above one of Utah's most extensive limestone cave systems. The caves weren't marked on modern maps. They'd been sealed and forgotten after the mining operations of the 1920s, when prospectors had carved tunnels deep into the bedrock, searching for silver and lead deposits that never materialized. According to historical records from the Utah Geological Survey, some of these excavations extended more than 200 feet underground, creating a honeycomb of artificial caverns beneath the desert floor. Dr. Winters contacted the search teams immediately. Within hours, a specialized ground-penetrating radar unit arrived from Salt Lake City, operated by a team from the University of Utah's Geology Department. What they found at coordinate point 39.8547 degree N, 113.4021 degree W defied their expectations. The radar images revealed massive voids directly beneath the spot where Chen's vehicle had been discovered. But these weren't natural limestone formations. The geometric patterns and precise angles suggested artificial construction, chambers and corridors that appeared to connect to a much larger underground network. "I've been doing subsurface surveys for 20 years, said Dr. Michael Torres, the radar technician who operated the equipment. "What we're seeing here looks intentionally excavated, but the scale is enormous. These aren't mining tunnels. This is something else entirely." Meanwhile, investigators had made their own discovery back at Chen's motel room. Hidden beneath the mattress in room 127 of the Desert Inn was Chen's personal field notebook, a leather-bound journal filled with hand-drawn maps and calculations that his supervisor had never seen. The notebook told a different story than Chen's official reports. While his federal paperwork focused on boundary surveys and GPS coordinates, his private notes revealed a growing obsession with what he called subsurface anomalies. Page after page contained sketches of underground chambers, measurements of what appeared to be artificial caverns, and compass bearings that led to hidden entrance points. One entry, dated September 10th, read, "Confirmed. Multiple access points along boundary section 47. Entrances appear deliberately concealed but recently used. Need to investigate connection to federal infrastructure concerns." Another entry from September 13th was more urgent. Metal detection shows significant ferrous materials approximately 180 feet below surface. Pattern suggests industrial equipment or storage facilities. This changes everything. Dr. Winters compared Chen's hand-drawn maps to the radar results. They matched perfectly. Chen had somehow mapped the underground network with remarkable accuracy, using only surface-level surveys in his GPS equipment. But his sketches showed something the radar couldn't reveal: entrance points that connected the underground chambers to the surface. According to Chen's notes, at least 3 concealed entrances existed within the disputed boundary area. One was marked as active with a notation that it showed signs of recent use, including fresh tire tracks and disturbed vegetation that suggested regular vehicle access. The notebook's final entry was dated September 14th, the day before Chen's disappearance. "Tomorrow night, Priority Site A ground disturbance patterns confirm major subsurface activity. Federal involvement certain. Need photographic evidence before reporting to BLM." That evening, Dr. Winters accompanied the sheriff's team to search for the entrance points Chen had documented. Using his maps as guides, they found the first location within an hour: a seemingly natural depression in the limestone, partially concealed by sagebrush and carefully arranged rocks. But when Deputy Martinez cleared the debris, they discovered something that made Chen's disappearance suddenly more ominous. The entrance was sealed with a heavy steel gate, recently installed and secured with federal-grade locks. Warning signs bolted to the metal declared the area off-limits due to environmental hazards and referenced federal statutes that carried criminal penalties for unauthorized access. More troubling was what they found near the entrance: fresh tire tracks from heavy vehicles, and in the dust beside the gate, a small fragment of reflective material that exactly matched the safety tape on Chen's surveying equipment. "This wasn't here a month ago," Dr. Winters told investigators. "I've been working this area for 15 years. These installations are recent, very recent." The discovery raised immediate questions about the timeline of Chen's disappearance. Had he found this entrance during his nighttime surveys? Had he attempted to investigate the underground network? And if so, who had been responsible for sealing it so quickly after his disappearance? Sheriff Morrison ordered the area secured as a potential crime scene, but his jurisdiction over federal land was limited. Within hours, representatives from multiple federal agencies had arrived to assess the situation. The underground network that Chen had discovered was no longer just a missing person case. It had become a matter of federal interest. As investigators pieced together Chen's final discoveries, one thing became clear. The federal surveyor had stumbled upon something far more significant than boundary disputes or historical mining claims. The underground chambers, the recent installations, the sophisticated concealment efforts, all pointed to activities that someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep hidden. But whether those activities were connected to Chen's disappearance remained an open question, one that would soon be complicated by an escalation of federal involvement that would change everything. The morning after the underground entrance was discovered, everything changed. Sheriff Morrison arrived at his office at 6:30 a.m. to find 2 black SUVs parked in his lot and 3 federal agents waiting in his lobby. They weren't there to assist with the search for Marcus Chen. They were there to take over. Agent Jennifer Walsh, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the lead agent announced, presenting credentials and a thick folder of official documents. "As of this morning, Mr. Chen's disappearance is a federal matter. We'll be assuming jurisdiction under the Federal Crimes Act, Section 1114, due to potential threats to federal infrastructure." Sheriff Morrison had worked with federal agencies before, but this felt different. The agents weren't interested in the local investigation's findings or the timeline of Chen's disappearance. Their questions focused entirely on who else knew about the underground discoveries, and whether any information had been shared with media or outside agencies. Dr. Winters found herself subjected to a 2-hour interview that felt more like an interrogation. "They wanted to know everything about my conversations with Chen," she later told a colleague. "Not about his disappearance, but about what he might have told me regarding his survey work. They were particularly interested in whether he'd mentioned anything about national security implications." The FBI's arrival coincided with revelations from Chen's BLM supervisor, Janet Phillips, who finally admitted the full scope of the boundary survey project. Chen hadn't been conducting routine land management work. He'd been part of a classified assessment of federal installations near critical habitat areas, a project that involved coordination between multiple agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security. Marcus was one of 12 surveyors working on what we called the Critical Infrastructure Protection Survey, Phillips explained in a statement to federal investigators. The goal was to identify potential security vulnerabilities around federal facilities that could be exploited by hostile actors. The Fish Springs area was flagged as a priority site due to its proximity to military testing ranges and communication installations. This explained Chen's nighttime work schedule and his access to specialized GPS equipment. It also explained why his reports had included references to electromagnetic anomalies and requests for ground-penetrating radar. He wasn't just mapping boundaries. He was conducting a security assessment of underground features that might pose risks to national defense installations. But Phillips' revelation raised more questions than it answered. Why hadn't she mentioned this during the initial missing person investigation? And why were federal agents more concerned about information security than finding a missing surveyor? The answer became clear when Dr. Winters attempted to return to the underground entrance site. The entire area had been cordoned off with federal barricades, and armed security personnel had been stationed at access points along the boundary roads. Signs declared the zone a temporary federal security area under emergency environmental protection statutes. Local rancher Tom Hadley watched the federal response with growing anger. "They've got more agents and equipment here than we've ever seen," he told deputies. "Helicopters flying overhead every few hours, vehicles coming and going all night. This isn't about finding Marcus Chen anymore. This is about covering something up." Hadley's observations were confirmed by other residents. The Desert Inn, where Chen had stayed, reported visits from federal agents who confiscated all registration records and security footage from the past month. The gas station where Chen had made his final fuel purchase was similarly visited, with agents removing surveillance videos and interviewing staff about Chen's activities and conversations. Perhaps most telling was the response from federal wildlife officials. Dr. Winters received a formal notice suspending her research permits for the Fish Springs Refuge, citing ongoing security assessments that required temporary restrictions on biological studies. The Refuge Visitor Center was closed indefinitely, and public access to hiking trails in the boundary area was prohibited. Unmarked government vehicles began appearing throughout Millard County. Local law enforcement reported encounters with federal personnel conducting their own interviews with residents, focusing on questions about underground features, historical mining activities, and any unusual discoveries made in the desert over the past several years. The message was clear. Whatever Marcus Chen had discovered during his nighttime surveys was significant enough to warrant a major federal security response. But whether that discovery was connected to his disappearance remained an open question. Meanwhile, the search for Chen himself seemed to fade into the background. Federal resources that could have been used to locate the missing surveyor were instead devoted to securing and analyzing the underground sites he documented. It was as if finding Chen had become less important than protecting whatever secrets lay beneath the Utah desert. 3 weeks after the federal takeover, Sheriff Morrison received a classified briefing from FBI agents. He emerged from that meeting unwilling to discuss details, but his statement to the press was telling. The Chen investigation remains active, but certain aspects of the case involve national security considerations that limit what information we can share with the public. For the residents of Millard County, that statement confirmed their growing suspicions. Marcus Chen's disappearance had uncovered something much larger than a missing person case, something the federal government was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to keep hidden. Agent Walsh's final press conference was brief and unsatisfying. "Mr. Chen's case is being handled through appropriate federal channels. We appreciate the public's interest, but cannot compromise ongoing security assessments by releasing operational details. We ask for the community's patience and cooperation during this process." But patience was wearing thin. Local officials found themselves shut out of an investigation that had begun in their jurisdiction. Families were left with questions that no one seemed willing to answer. And Marcus Chen remained missing, his fate now buried beneath layers of federal classification and national security concerns. The boundary survey that had brought Chen to Fish Springs was quietly suspended. The disputed grazing lands that had generated decades of conflict were suddenly resolved in favor of federal ownership, with ranchers receiving settlement offers they found difficult to refuse. As federal agents consolidated their control over the investigation, one thing became clear. Whatever Marcus Chen had discovered in the Utah desert was significant enough to change the entire landscape of the case, and perhaps to ensure that some questions would never be answered. 6 months have passed since Marcus Chen vanished from coordinate point 39.8547 degree N, 113.4021 degree W in the Utah desert. His case file remains open, but active investigation has effectively ceased. The questions surrounding his disappearance have only multiplied, creating a web of mysteries that extends far beyond a single missing surveyor. The official conclusion, released by the FBI in December 2019, was deliberately vague. Mr. Chen's disappearance appears to be the result of circumstances related to his federal survey duties. The investigation is ongoing, but no evidence suggests criminal activity by civilian actors. The case remained classified due to national security considerations. That statement satisfied no one, least of all Chen's family. His sister, Linda Chen, traveled from California to Utah repeatedly, pressing for answers that never came. "They won't tell us if he's alive or dead," she said in an interview with Salt Lake City media. "They won't tell us what he found, what he was really doing out there, or why they've sealed off the area where he disappeared. We just want to know what happened to our brother." The federal security zone around Fish Springs remains active today. The underground entrance points that Chen documented are still sealed and guarded. Public access to large sections of the wildlife refuge has never been restored. Most telling, the boundary dispute that originally brought Chen to the area was quietly resolved in favor of the federal government, with ranchers receiving financial settlements in exchange for signed non-disclosure agreements. Tom Hadley accepted one such settlement but remains deeply troubled by the experience. "They paid me 3 times what that grazing land was worth," he admits. "But the paperwork I had to sign, I can't even tell my own family what I saw out there those last few weeks. Let's just say Marcus Chen found something that certain people didn't want found." Dr. Winters has drawn her own conclusions based on the scientific evidence she was able to gather before the federal takeover. Her theory centers on the underground network Chen discovered. The radar imagery showed chambers too large and too precisely constructed to be natural formations or abandoned mining operations. Combined with Marcus's notes about recent activity and federal infrastructure, I believe he stumbled upon a classified installation, possibly related to national defense or intelligence operation. This theory aligns with the region's history. The Fish Springs area lies within 50 miles of military testing ranges, missile facilities, and communication installations that have operated since World War II. Underground bunkers and storage facilities, built during the Cold War, dot the Utah landscape, many of them still classified and actively maintained. But other theories persist among local residents. Some believe Chen discovered evidence of illegal activities, drug storage, human trafficking, or environmental crimes that powerful interests wanted to keep hidden. The deliberate concealment of the underground entrances and the signs of recent vehicle activity support this possibility. A darker theory suggests Chen's disappearance was not accidental. His supervisor, Janet Phillips, let slip during one interview that Chen had expressed concerns about his safety in the days before he vanished. "Marcus called me on September 12th, Phillips recalled. He said he felt like he was being watched, that vehicles had been following him on the back roads. I told him to file a report with local law enforcement, but I don't think he ever did." The precision of Chen's final GPS coordinates adds another layer of mystery. His equipment recorded location data every 30 seconds until exactly 12:52 a.m. on September 15th, then stopped completely. No distress signal was sent. No emergency protocols were activated. The sudden cessation of data suggests either equipment failure or deliberate intervention, but which remains unknown. Perhaps most puzzling is the continued federal interest in the site. Government vehicles still patrol the boundary roads regularly. The underground installations, whatever they are, remain heavily secured. New construction activity has been reported in the restricted area, including the installation of additional security barriers and what appears to be expanded underground access points. Dr. Winters periodically monitors the area from a distance, using long-range equipment to track environmental changes. The wildlife patterns have never returned to normal, she reports. Species that were common in that area before Marcus disappeared are still absent. Something underground is affecting the ecosystem in ways we don't understand. Meanwhile, Chen's GPS coordinates have taken on a life of their own. The exact location, 39.8547 degree, 113.4021 degree, has become a waypoint of interest for conspiracy theorists, urban explorers, and amateur investigators who travel to Utah hoping to solve the mystery. I'll find the same thing: federal barriers, warning signs, and security personnel who turn away visitors with polite but firm efficiency. The coordinate point itself has been marked in federal databases as a permanent restricted area. Satellite imagery shows ongoing activity at the site, but the images are routinely censored or removed from public mapping services. Whatever lies beneath that specific point in the Utah desert remains hidden from civilian view. For the residents of Millard County, Marcus Chen's disappearance has become a defining event, a reminder that their remote landscape harbors secrets they may never understand. The federal presence has diminished, but never disappeared entirely. Questions that seemed simple 6 months ago, where is Marcus Chen, and what happened to him, have evolved into larger puzzles about government transparency, national security, and the hidden infrastructure that operates beneath America's public lands. Local law enforcement continues to receive occasional tips and reports, but Deputy Martinez, who responded to the original scene, admits the trail has gone cold. "We did everything we could with the resources we had," he says. "But once the feds took over, our hands were tied. Marcus Chen became their problem, and they're not sharing solutions." The Desert Inn still displays Chen's photograph in the lobby, a professional headshot showing a serious young man with careful eyes and surveyor's precision in his expression. The manager, Maria Santos, says federal agents still visit occasionally, asking the same questions about Chen's final days. "They never seem satisfied with the answers," she observes. "It's like they're looking for something specific, something we don't know we have." The coordinates 39.8547 degree N, 113.4021 degree W continue to mark a place where a federal surveyor vanished without explanation, where underground mysteries intersect with surface reality. Marcus Chen may be gone, but the questions his disappearance raised continue to multiply, spreading across the endless grid of possibilities that his final survey left behind.